Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I want to thank you for listening to The Dash with Matrilla. Guys, I am back again with me and Rabbi Matt. Matthew Abelson. I'm sorry, sometimes I shorten it, but by now you guys should know exactly who he is. He is our favorite rabbi here on the podcast, The Dash with Matrilla. So I want to remind you, for anyone who is new to the podcast and maybe you're just joining, you want to see what everything is about and be encouraged. Well, for us, when me and Rabbi Matt comes together, we are focusing on connecting divided groups between Jews and Christians. We're looking at the cultures and the viewpoints between the two, and we're doing that by just studying the Word of God, the Torah portions for the week. So, with that, I always want to make sure that we understand we are not we're not coming together to change anyone's viewpoint of their traditions or how they do things, but what we are doing is trying to bridge the gap. And bridging that gap looks like coming together to make sure that we understand we all come from the same tree, we're cut from the same cloth. We may have different viewpoints, we have different ways of living and different traditions, but ultimately, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the foundation for the one true God that we all follow. So, with that, I am going to say good morning to Rabbi Matt. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good morning. Good morning, Pastor.
Good, good. So we're in Deuteronomy, and let me get back to it. We're in Deuteronomy chapter 11 this morning, 11 between 22 and 16. I'm sorry, 11, 26 and 16 and 17. I think that's correct. Um, did I get that right?
That is correct.
I think we
And
did.
I'll just reiterate something I said last week. The Torah is a scroll, and we have the chapters for the sake of organization from the Christians. And this is what we share. Christians call it the Old Testament, we call it the Tanakh. It is a shared text, and it's amazing to me that it's taken this long 2,000 years almost to get a sense of communion. But that's what I experienced with you. And I hope our listeners can sense that when we study together. And I'm grateful that you have such a passionate interest in the word, in the five books and beyond. And so we just go through verse by verse and discuss. And all of Deuteronomy is Moses's monologue. Fare thee well. I'm not going into the land. You will. So all that we read here is Moses's speech.
I love it. And just the book itself is a reiterating, and he's preparing them for the land that they're going into, also with reminding them of what not to repeat.
Yes, primarily around the mistakes of idolatry. And yes, the central aspect of the land. And I think one of the things that's allowed us to connect is our experiences in the land of Israel, visiting the land of Israel in this time.
I love it. Okay, so shall we get started? And I'll go ahead and start. We're in 11, Deuteronomy chapter 11, or portion 11 and 26. And it reads, Behold, I set before you today blessings and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I commanded you today, and the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside from the way which I command you today, to go after other gods which you have not known. Now it shall be, when the Lord your God has brought you into the land which you go to possess, that you shall put the blessings on Mount Gerizim and the curses on Mount Ebal. And then 30 says, Are they not on the other side of the Jordan toward the setting sun in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the plain opposite Gilgal, beside the terebinth trees of Morah? For you will cross over the Jordan and go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and you will possess it and dwell in it. And you shall be careful to observe all the statutes and judgments which I set before you today. So should we touch on that?
I mean, the first voice just sets up choice.
Mm-hmm.
We have choices in life,
Mm-hmm.
and going one way will lead to blessing, and going the other way will lead to curse.
Mm-hmm. Two paths,
Indeed.
two paths in life. So, and again, we're back to obedience and obedience over disobedience or versus disobedience, which is, I think sometimes even today, people don't realize, and a lot of times I don't think we see it as a disobedience or an obedience towards God. Only when there's a blessing, like if we get a blessing, we're quick to say, this is from being obedient to God. But when things are not going accordingly, you rarely hear someone say, I was disobedient, if that makes sense. You rarely hear that part.
It does. It does. In the aftermath, we want the credit, but it's hard to operate, in self-criticism. And the word obey, I saw it on t-shirts maybe like 5, 10 years ago.
Mhm.
People were wearing shirts that said obey. And it really struck me, because I assumed that they were coming from the standpoint of Christianity. And I always felt like Christianity was about grace and mercy and faith, and that obedience was a way of the OT Tanakh. But this was maybe an indication that people were grounding into that
Mhm.
first of the
Mhm.
set, which pleases me. And so as I heard you say the word obedience, I looked at the Hebrew. I thought, what is the Hebrew word for obedience? Well, actually, it's Shema, Shin Mem Ayin, which means to listen, or we might say to hearken, because listening is okay, sound enters my ears, but to hearken is enters my ears and I take account of it, and then I conform to a behavior. So obedience is the sophisticated word that comes from the very basic Hebrew word of listen, hearken.
Ah, I love it. And thank you for just even being transparent on that part, thinking that the difference between the two, the New Testament being just about grace and the OT being about the obedience. And sometimes that is still taught. And that is one of the things that we have to kind of get away from, because a lot of times obedience sounds like a horrible word, like, or a slave word or something like that. And sometimes it's taught that way, that, oh, to be obedient, that means you have to follow the laws and do all those things. And again, people get so hung up on the law, but the Torah is literally the foundation. And we see it in Deuteronomy. It is the foundation of how to live. Although he's teaching them how to live in this particular land that they have possession over, because God has given to them. But oftentimes inside the church, it is not taught that that same grace that you hold on to in the New Testament is the same grace that is in the Torah. It's that God has shown grace from the time he brought them out of Egypt into the promised land. So it again, it's both being seen. One is concealed in the other, and the other is revealed. And so we get to see it come together as one complete, what's the word I'm looking for, complete way of living, if I can say it that
That
way.
is that is so well put, and there are different emphases at different times for Jews and for Christians, but we can find in each other's conduct
Hmm.
things that are in our own tradition that maybe have, like you mentioned, grace. Yeah,
Hmm.
I did not grow up with the concept that grace was central to Judaism, but what is grace? It is undeserved reward. So not every good thing that happens to us is because we deserved it.
That's right.
There are times when Hashem, when God bestows kindness upon us,
Hmm.
we did nothing to deserve it. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
So again, even if we look at this is Moses in the book of Deuteronomy. This is basically what he's showing them. It doesn't say that, but if we just look at it, just kind of with a different lens, he's really telling, look, you guys have done, you've come through with your parents. Your parents died off, and then why? It's not that you deserve anything, but God had already set it up so that you can have it. All you have to, the caveat to it, the prereq to it is be obedient. If you already have the land, but to live prosperously in it is to
Mhm.
be obedient. We already have the life. We have life, right? We're living in borrowed dirt, if so to speak, because the dirt belongs to God. But we have life. So to have the life that He has already written out for us, be obedient to what's already written. The Torah gives us the way of life. And in the New Testament, guess what they follow? The Torah. That's all they had. That's all they had to live life. That's all they
And
had.
I want to know more about how you came to feel that law was so essential to flourishing in life. I would just say another way that you can think about for those who are feeling allergic to law, is instruction. The Torah is instruction. You can't just be alive and assume you're going to make up and figure out everything on your own. There is tradition, there
Yes,
are elders,
yes,
and there is a teaching which was revealed. This teaching was revealed. Okay, this is not philosophy, which is
yes.
wonderful, where it's your mind. This was an encounter that Moses and the people had at Sinai. And then you see in the era of that first century with Jesus and his disciples,
Mm-hmm,
they want the whole world
mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm,
know about this revelation. And that
mm-hmm,
is then experienced as revelation.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So so true and so true and spot on. Um, And the only thing I can add to it for people who still struggle with just because some people don't read any, they kind of skim on it and only read the, Psalms and things like that. But when you look at it, like you say, it is instructions. And sometimes I think people get caught up in the portion that says law because you look at it from a modern day standpoint of what law is and it's being forced on you, but it's not, because to be a follower of Christ, or believer, or whichever way you want to put it, I still kind of have an issue with the word Christian a lot of times. So for me, it's just a believer. But when you look at it, Christ was giving instructions to his disciples. He was leading them, just as you said, instructions, but he gave reference to the OT all the time. There's a reference there. All the disciples reference, whether they're referencing Isaiah, whether they're referencing Joel, they're making reference to Moses. All of those references are there because in that culture, it was still important because they never stopped being Jewish. They never stopped their traditions. So they're pulling into what we call the new covenant. They're pulling the old covenant in. The old covenant never disappears. It's still there. There's only just a changing of the one changing, and Christ is the only changing that comes in. But everybody is still following the Torah. That's all they had. The Torah and the prophets, right? So,
Indeed, indeed.
okay. So, where are we?
Well, here we
12?
are. We have this word laws. So, at least in my translation, these are the laws and rules that you must carefully observe in the land that the Lord God of your fathers is giving you to possess as long as you live on earth. You must destroy all the sites at which the nations you are to dispossess worshipped their gods, whether on lofty mountains and on hills or under any luxuriant tree. Tear down their altars, smash their pillars, put their sacred posts to the fire, cut down the images of their gods, obliterating their name from that site. And this is intentional, the framing here, and I love going out into the woods and going for a hike, and nature is inspiring to me. But the human habit early on was the worship of nature. And we are not only natural beings, we are also free.
Mm-hmm.
And the teaching of the Torah is a teaching of freedom, right? So when we were liberated from Egypt, instead of Pharaoh being obedient to Pharaoh, we became obedient to the Torah and to God. And
Mm-hmm.
so these idolatrous sites are very intentionally placed on lofty mountains, luxuriant trees, because there is a tendency when you have an experience in nature to want to worship that. And what we're trying to be taught is that our own conduct is the measure of us, not this experience in the world. That doesn't mean we retreat from the world, but being able to look at one's own conduct and evaluate it and try to have it in conformance with the Creator, that's really what we're aiming for.
I like that. And thank you for pointing out and just even sharing that about the freedom portion, because again, most people don't are not taught. I won't say they don't know. I would say a lot of times they're not taught unless they kind of do a little more studying for themselves, are not taught that the Torah is about freedom. Because again, it typically is taught that it falls into bondage, so to speak. For some people, they know it as again, the law, and the law is bondage because they take certain scriptures out of proper context. It's not that it was not said. Paul says, you're no longer in bondage, but it's not talking about a bondage in which it keeps you from doing something and there is no freedom. So thank you for pointing out that that part of that Torah is about freedom.
Well, let me distinguish between license and freedom. License is I do whatever I want when I want to do it. And that may be gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
I may be able to live like that for weeks, months, years, depending on God's mercy.
Mm-hmm.
But freedom is about responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And these are kind of paradoxical ideas, and it's hard to get away, especially in a culture which is open to hedonism, which is our culture. We live in a free society where you can choose
Mm-hmm.
to seek the blessing or seek the curse. And part of the curse may be the self-deception of pursuing a life strictly of material pleasure or sensual pleasure. And maybe you get to live that way your whole life. For those of us who stay in this path, it can be a challenge. There can be suffering. We may not get the external reinforcement that tells us that we are succeeding, right? It's like what I touched on last week with Moses. Moses doesn't enter the land of Israel.
Right, right.
If you were the CEO of a company or you were a professional athlete and you never win the championship, or you go up to your stockholders and say, well, we didn't make a profit this year, people will say, okay, someone else is going to have your job.
Because
Did
you
Moses
failed.
fail? Did Moses fail by not getting into the land? He simply was denied something, but the people went in and he saw, but that was a sacrifice. That was
Yes.
his sacrifice.
Yes, yes. I like that freedom has a responsibility, and most people want the freedom without the responsibility. Kendrick and I was talking about this maybe a day or so ago, and we put it this way: most people want the blessings, but they don't. They want the crown. I'm sorry, they want the crown, but not the cross, because the cross represents a sacrifice. It represents, pain and anguish. So to your point, it's the exact same thing. Moses sacrificed. He did all the things that he was supposed to do. He said yes, he was obedient to God, and so he wasn't a failure. And thank you for pointing that out. I have heard people say, "Well, it seems to me like Moses failed because he didn't get a chance to get into the promised land, but he got to see it. But he also kept, if I can say it this way, he was the medium for a remnant still going into
Yes.
the land. So that's not failure. That's a win. That's successful. And some
The
people.
word remnant is so critical. We use that term all the time
Mhm,
because you had 12 tribes.
mhm,
And from those 12 tribes was only one, Shevet Yehudah, that
mhm,
remained. That's a remnant. And we see it in Isaiah, a
mhm,
remnant.
mhm.
Not every person is going to be able to walk this life, but if you can keep a portion of it, and we experience this, many people may come to our services, but it may be that we can really only help and transform a portion of them. We try with everyone,
Yes, yes.
but a remnant is a really critical concept here.
Yeah, because it can go as long as you still have a little left, right? It's,
Yes,
it's like a little leaven affects the whole loaf. So if we just got a little bit, it could still grow into something great, which is a great thing. And I'm grateful that we are a remnant together
indeed, we are.
and we're growing. So five, are we at five?
Yes.
Do you want to continue there?
Do not worship the Lord your God in like manner, but look only to the site that the Lord your God will choose amidst all
Mhm.
your tribes as his habitation to establish his name there. There you are to go, and there you are to bring your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions, your votive and freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks, together with your households. And you shall feast there before the Lord your God, happy in all the undertakings in which the Lord your God has blessed you. And so I think two things here. You mentioned anguish and the cross, and we don't want to make the mistake of religious life of thinking all of religious life is anguish. There is a part of it that is.
Yep,
It's necessary.
yep.
We see here that happiness is critical. And I hope that if you are in a state of anguish, that you do
Mhm,
find that happiness. I think anyone who's connected to the word has to experience some of that anguish.
mhm,
But
mhm.
happiness is the goal. And Jerusalem is not mentioned by name, but this centralization of worship The idea that you can't just go off and, you're going to be worship, this tribal worship here, this tribal. No, everyone's going to come to one place,
Place.
and that's the unity that
Mhm.
Jerusalem offers. And King David creates that for us.
I like that. So there in verse 6, I I I I I don't know if I heard the first bringing the firstborns as well. What was that in your is that in your particular translation in verse 6 with your tithes and having your offerings and the free will with the
Not
herds and the flocks,
well, yes, yes. Uvchorot and the firstlings, firstborn of your herds. They use the word firstlings here,
your
but
firstlings?
the word Bechor, yes, firstborn of your flock.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because again, I share with you, I like word study. So first link or firstborn, it's there for a reason. Again, we're talking about Moses reminding them. So this is the part where even still we're supposed to have that reminder from generation to generation of what took place. Because when you take a look at the firstling or the firstborn, it's a reminder of God's deliverance out of Egypt. When we look at this and where what happened with the firstborns of the Egyptians, how they were struck down, and all those things. So I like to remind people when you're studying. Again, I like word study. Find out why words are there. Why say your firstlings or your firstborn? Why talk about the herds? Why talk about the flocks? All of that is important for them to understand and remember to pass it on as they're possessing this land where they're going to live. And even today, when we think about scriptures like this, especially verse 6, a lot of people are not aware that it even says that or why it says it. They just kind of run through it and say, oh yeah, God said bring everything, and then they say, yeah, that's because he wants the best of everything first. But Deuteronomy is a reminding book. So it's not that God is saying he wants the best, it's a reminder of being obedient to what it is that I've already given to you.
Well, it's consistent with Abraham's binding of Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you wait your whole lifetime to experience something like Abraham being a father, and then as soon as you get that child, you're supposed to bind and sacrifice.
Yes.
Well, all of the stars in the sky or the sands of the sea, that those are the progeny of Abraham. So that again, that experience of sort of retreating from the first. In this case, you actually have to give up the first completely. In the case of Isaac, he got him back. But it's a promise for the future. It's really hard to give up the
Yeah.
first fruit.
Yeah.
You worked
Yeah.
hard for that.
Yeah.
And so there's an implicit promise that this is just the first, this is just the beginning, but there's a lot to come.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that. Never heard it quite that way because it is very hard to give up the first of anything, especially when you're already going through something and you're thinking, we're already hungry. You want me to give, the first of everything, or I'm already struggling. You want me to give the first of, my finances, whatever it may be. But we're back to a sacrifice and knowing that there's more to come. And not just thinking, okay, I'm going to do it because I know more is going to come, because it's also heart posture. It's heart posture.
Oh, that's good.
Do
Yeah.
you believe in your heart that there's more to come? And thank you, Abraham was a good example because the scripture doesn't say it, but when you look at it, Abraham is obedient to say yes because you already promised me that nations are going to come. It's going to be something great coming out. So whether you're going to resurrect him or I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm going off of the promise you already gave me. So it's a heart posture also. I do want to point that out for people because sometimes people just say, oh, well, just do it because more is going to happen. But you don't really believe more. You're just kind of in what I call desperate mode. And you're kind of, sometimes I like to say you're trying to finesse God. Like you're trying to trick him to thinking that, yeah, I believe that you're going to do it. So heart
Well,
posture is important.
I think what you're teaching takes me back to verse 28 of 11, where the Torah says, I enjoin upon you this day, and don't follow other gods whom you have not experienced. We are meant to have the experience. If you read this and you know what comes afterward, well, that's not heart posture. Heart posture is the experience of
Yes.
it. You have to live and relive. You know that's what's supposed to
Yeah.
come, but knowing that doesn't mean you can just, avoid the heart posture.
Yes, experience. I love it. So I'll pick up an 8. You shall not at all do as we are doing here today, every man doing whatever is right in his own eyes. For as yet you have not come to the rest and the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. But when you cross over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies round about, so that you dwell in safety. Then there will be the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. There you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, the heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to the Lord. And you shall reject before the Lord your God, you and your sons. I'm sorry, rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, your male and your female servants, and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. Take heed to yourselves that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see, but in the place which the Lord chooses. In one of your tribes, there you shall offer your burnt offerings, and there you shall do all that I command you. Um, I think we have a little bit of time. So can you just kind of touch on the offerings, if we can take a look at that, like the different offerings that is put in place and why?
It's a wonderful question. I think we have to begin with animal sacrifice to begin with, and blood is central.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this sense that blood is the life of anything that's alive. And so it's kind of an enactment, right? Because one of the things we forget, and it's alluded to in the Abraham Isaac narrative, is human sacrifice was a part of human cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that you would sacrifice your fellow humans to appease the gods is something that we see in many cultures. And so animal sacrifice was a step away from that, but still connected to it. So, and the different animals represent different, in this context, not so much sin, but in other contexts, based on what you've done in order to make restitution or to come into a state of repentance and atonement, there are certain animals, their size, right? Like a bird or a beast are required, for the sake of the sin offering. Um, but going back to things you and I were speaking about earlier, the temple is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the open questions in Judaism today is, do we expect the temple to be rebuilt? And
Mm.
if it is rebuilt, will there be animal sacrifices? And some people will say, well, prayer really was the goal. And so the fact that prayer came to substitute for animal sacrifice was where we were supposed to end up. So, whether or not we're going to have a temple, we know that prayer is going to be central and animal sacrifice is not. But that's the way I try to understand animal sacrifice, because I have never sacrificed an animal myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I understand it along that trajectory from human sacrifice to prayer.
And thank you for adding that point as well for some of our listeners, because that question does come up sometimes. I think when people are trying to be cynical and they say, well, so you have this back and forth. They say, well, if they say, the Jews say that, oh, well, we don't believe in this, so where are they still sacrificing animals? Where are they sacrificing the animals? And I'm just like, yeah, so then you'd have to go to the temple and what stopped and how it stopped and what took place. And that's even just to kind of piggyback on that. When you start with the animal sacrifice, the bringing up of animals again in the New Testament in the book of Acts actually still shows you that these are still Jewish men, Jewish
Mm,
young men following Jewish traditions, because the one thing that they tell the Gentiles who are coming into the fold, so we speak, coming into the community of Judaism, or the community of the Jews, they talk about the animals and the blood. That was one of the things they could not do. So they give them this whole, and matter of fact, I'll just pull it up really quick and read. It's Acts 21 and 25. And so when you read Acts 21 and 25, and I'm sorry I didn't give you that, but that just came to me when you came
yes,
out with the
let me look
animals.
inside.
So Acts 21 and 25, it says, but concerning the Gentiles, meaning the non-Jews who believe, and these are ones who have identified Yeshua as the Messiah, who believe we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, meaning they did not have to be circumcised. That was the only thing that that applied for them to come in, but they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. Those
Mm,
things are important. So the only thing, again, it shows you the Jewishness, even in the New Testament. The only
absolutely.
thing was they took away the circumcision part because the circumcision part was for Jewish boys. You see, but the animal part still comes into play because of the very thing. It's the life. It's the life.
The context, I think that's what I'm hearing. And yes, the New Testament is immersed in a Jewish context.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I think do we stop here or do we go
I think we
further?
can hold it here. I think I'd like, look, there's a lot to cover, but I think we keep giving a taste, and I'm at least feeling a lot of synergy.
Yeah.
And some of it is I'm imagining how our listeners are responding. And I
Yes.
think that also excites me because it's a real opportunity for bridging
Yes.
and
Yes.
grounding into shared scripture.
Yes.
And the fact that we are all worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether we're doing that in the context of circumcising our male boys or not,
Mm-hmm.
we're still part of that tree.
Yes, yes, and I absolutely love it. Well, thank you so much for share. I love when we get a chance to do this, and I'm
My
so glad
pleasure,
that
my
we
honor,
went public
Pastor.
with. I'm glad we went public with it because I think it will. A lot of people will benefit from it from both sides. So I will and oh, and then we did not say what was so what is today's portion? Is it rehi?
That's right, which means sight,
Psych. Sight.
sight.
Oh, sight. Okay, I'm saying psych like okay. Well, guys, that's it. And again, as always, we want to make sure that you do your due diligence. Pick up your words, study it for yourself. Deuteronomy 11:26 and then 16 to 17. And then I didn't give this information, but if you're going into the prophets, look at Isaiah 54:11, 55, and 5. And then in the Gospels, look at John chapter 6, 35 through 51. All of it ties in together. Nothing is left out. God is very strategic with everything that he does. And so we want to make sure that you continue to follow the word. Don't just take our word for it, but study it for yourself. Okay. So you know what I say. Never give up on your life, never give up on your dreams, and never give up on God. And remember, the victory, it still belongs to Jesus. Have a great day.